lazy, pathetic, failure, worthless, hopeless. These are all things I have used to describe myself when my mental illness affects my job. So I know we've all seen the meme, and it's when your depression and your anxiety mix, and the depression is telling you that you need to stay home from work, and your anxiety is telling you that if you stay home from work, you're going to get fired, and the picture is a man crying in the shower. I know we've all seen it and we've all laughed because it's funny and it's relatable, but it's also really problematic, and it says a lot about us as a society. Poor mental health was found to be both a consequence of and risk factor for unemployment. And this is from the author Sarah Colson. Doesn't this seem unfair? If an employee were to have, say, a broken leg, they wouldn't be at risk of being fired because they can see it. Their employer can see it. How is that fair? Mental illness is just as valid. Now, under the ADA, your employer only needs to provide accommodations for limitations that can be directly connected to your disability. But what if your accommodations are unusual and they're not what your employer expects? Say you need the ability to leave a shift or call off of a shift if you have a mental health emergency. That's often unthinkable. When you tell your boss that this may be what you need, they look at you like they don't understand. They look at you like you're crazy. It's very similar to in high school if a mental health professional is able to write you a note for if you have a mental health emergency to be able to get out of school or leave early. And that seems unthinkable because it's a blanket statement. And what if you take advantage of it? In my experience, when an employer is confronted about a mental illness, they seem to want the employee to take a leave or to quit the job, but that isn't always an option. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, an individual must have been employed with a company for 12 months in order to receive FMLA, or the Family Medical Leave Act. In the state of Kentucky, that is 6 months. And the same goes for intermittent FMLA. Now, intermittent FMLA would be more accurate for someone with a mental illness that is unable to attend work. Intermittent FMLA, to my understanding, is when you go into work, you clock in, and you're required to stay in the back room or the break room for 30 minutes. If you cannot continue, you can go home without penalty. And it's the same as if that were in the middle of a shift. However, this cannot be used 2 days in a row. So while it does have its pros, that's also a con. But you still have to have been with a company for 6 months. But what if you start a job and 2 months later you have a mental health emergency? You relapse into depression. You can't do anything about it. The Department of Labor is not on your side anymore. So, latest research out of the University of Cambridge finds that up to 8 hours of paid work a week significantly boosts mental health and life satisfaction. And this is with somebody who has a mental illness or in general. I mean, and it seems accurate. But why? So why is it that when a person only wants to work a couple days a week because of their mental illness, why is it that they're viewed as lazy? When this happens to you, when you go through the grief, people feel like this grief is not recognized. They feel like you should be happy. Of course you should be happy. You're lazy. You're getting out of work. That's the whole reason you're doing it, right? And that is when we have disenfranchised grief with mental illness. Now, society views mental illness as invalid. And we are improving upon that. However, there are so many areas we're lacking. And because of these views, people suffer in silence. I have personally, to use a personal example, my best friend is a manager at Walgreens in Alexandria, Kentucky, and she has dealt with very similar mental illness as I have, and because of her upbringing and how her father chose to raise her with the sentiment, she refuses to call off of work because she would feel lazy. And she has also unintentionally said that I was lazy because I didn't go to work or school. So when we're dealing, if you were to deal with a client, say if somebody was to deal with me or another person like me, when we're dealing with a client that's going through this, if they come to you and they tell you what's happening and they say, oh my goodness, I just feel I'm so lazy, I'm pathetic, I'm a failure. How could I possibly succeed? What is good about me if I can't even work? That's a really powerful statement to hear. So I feel like as the helping professional at that point, we would want to use the strengths-based approach so that we can help this client focus in on their skills, what they have to give. Say you can only work Tuesday and Thursday and you can only work in the afternoon. That is a strength because you can work. At this point, we would need to work with this client in order to show them that they do have valid things to offer. They do have skills. Because this is important to do while the client is undergoing treatment for the underlying mental illness. But if we don't treat these feelings, it's not helping. You're not helping, and the person may be more likely to go back to work before they're not ready. Now, I want to go back to one of the quotes I mentioned, and that is that you only have to work 8 hours a week in order to improve your mental health. But when you go to your boss and you say, hey, I need to work less hours for my mental health, and they brush you off and they say, well, you're going to have to take that up with this person, and then they want you to take a leave of absence. Now, never mind the time limit for FMLA. They're brushing you off because they don't want to deal with your issues. They don't want to be open-minded and help you through to do what you need to do. This does not make the person lazy. This makes the boss lazy. And once we recognize as a society that mental illness is valid, that mental illness is a true problem, maybe we would see these individuals who aren't able to work because of mental illness or who are having to take leaves of absences, maybe we would see them being employed longer, staying at jobs, not hopping jobs. So, what I want everyone to do after watching this is I would like you to think about the people that we see on government assistance. If they use because of a disability that is mental illness. I want you to remember that looks can be deceiving. We don't know the person's story until we've walked a mile in their shoes. Thank you.